And this turbine, it sits down in the well. It's all the way down. This whole thing is down underwater in a well or in a pond, or along the Columbia River they'll have pump stations, and they'll have the bowls of the turbine have to be down in the water. And there's a stack of them, and the water comes up from one to the next to the next, and what it does is each stack gives it more pressure. So as it comes through the first one to the second one, it increases the pressure incrementally. So if we started at 20 psi, the second one would make it to 40 psi, the third one to 60 psi, the fourth one to 80 psi, through the fifth one we'd have 100 psi coming up out of the top. So it's a stack of impellers. They all run simultaneously at the same speed. And they're driven by a shaft. And this shaft goes all the way up the well and is attached to a motor at the top of the well. At the top of the well. So that's the way a turbine works. This would hook on to a motor at the top of the well. And there would be a column that the water's trapped in that's going all the way to the top of the well. So it's a pretty expensive per horsepower unit, but you can get these very, very large. We see them up to, on the Columbia River, I've seen 1,250 horsepower is the biggest one I've seen working out on the farm. And they can get bigger than that, but for agricultural use, we'll see them that size. And generally about 20 horsepower is about the smallest you'll see with turbines. Because 20 horsepower and under, we can go to another option that works similarly, and that is a submersible. And a submersible is just a little different. It sits down in the well. In fact, this is a replication of this is a piece of well casing. They just take steel, Schedule 40 steel, and slide it down in the well, and that's the well casing. You set the pump down in the well, has to be small enough to fit down the hole. It has electric motor down at the bottom. Then there's a place for the water to enter, and then the impellers stack right up in this area. This is the impeller stack. And so they're going, it looks just like that turbine, except this is obviously a much smaller pump. So those impellers are only about that thick. And they're stacked in there, and in here there's probably a dozen impellers stacked in this column right here, feeding one to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, building pressure. So if it's 15 gallons a minute coming in the first one, every one of them's pumping 15 gallons a minute, but each one of them's adding incremental pressure. So it might be 10 psi, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. If there's a dozen of them, you'll have 120 psi at the top of this stack, still pumping 15 gallons a minute. Okay? So the flow's constant, the pressure's additive on how many impellers you put. You can just keep putting more on the stack. You just have to put a bigger motor on it when you do that, because you're pumping more pressure. Then you have to have electric wires coming down the system all the way down the well to it. So this all has to be extremely well protected. They have to be totally waterproof. So does the motor. This is totally enclosed motor, and it's submerged, so it has to be totally sealed up, otherwise it'll burn out instantly. So it takes a special motor. And then we just have a column then, a pipe, that comes up to the top of the well and discharges it out into the field. So that's a submersible. A nice little pump, and they got these now up to, you can get these up to 200 horsepower. Normally you're going to find them in the half horsepower to the 20 horsepower ranges where they're really used most commonly. Domestic wells, very popular using submersibles. And then the last one was the jet pump, and it's really an aberration of the centrifugal. It works exactly like a centrifugal, except it sends part of its flow back down through the well and recycles some of the water to give it more lift. It gives it an added boost on the suction side. It gives a lift to the suction side of the system.